Hello, all you textual deviants, and welcome to Season 3, Episode 14, the first in several months. Our apologies, dear listeners. But we're back, your favorite podcasting duo, Boy in St. Petersburg.
And Mark Will in Taipei. What are we talking about today?
Today, courtesy of the Cambridge GCSE curriculum, we are talking about the 1958 play, A Taste of Honey, by Shelagh Delaney.
So that's why you picked it.
It is.
Because it's part of that curriculum. I see. Are you teaching it?
I have the option to. They give us 5 plays, and we can teach either 1 or 2. So I'm teaching A Streetcar Named Desire, like 100%.
Yeah.
And the other options, I don't remember all of them, but I know that of the 5, there's A Taste of Honey, A Midsummer Night's Dream, Antony and Cleopatra, and one more, which I can't remember, but yeah. So I just thought this might be more accessible than the Shakespeare, and I actually think it could be an interesting parallel text accompaniment to A Streetcar Named Desire. It's like,
yes,
both dealing with class, both sides of the Atlantic. You kind of have triangles in each.
Yep.
So yeah, I am slightly consistently surprised by the content that they choose for GCSE, because as I've told you before, GCSE is targeted at like the 14 to 16-year-old range. So it's
pretty
before the A-level.
Mature subject matter.
Yeah, I'm really surprised that they want people this young reading this stuff. Not that I want to be like censorious in any way, but yeah, I'm just surprised they don't give them content that's more like Buildings Roman, rite of passage stuff. I mean, I guess I taught To Kill a Mockingbird last year, and like that's obviously a lot more age appropriate, maybe. But regardless,
what is that acronym? GCSG? What's that?
GCSE.
GCSC.
It's the General Certificate of Secondary Education.
GCSE. Okay.
Yeah, and so it doesn't have that much significance to people applying for university in the UK, but like based on their GCSE results, it will often determine which courses they take for A-levels. And then and universities care a lot about A-levels, but most students take like 3 A-levels, and they might take up to like 8, even 10 GCSEs. So yeah, then after the GCSE, they really focus.
I zoned out when you mentioned A-levels, but that's okay.
Anyways,
tell me about the title, A Taste of Honey.
Sure. Well, prior to getting the biblical explanation, it seems like it refers to... Well, before we even go there, I thought I could do a very brief Wikipedia synopsis, okay? So just for our listeners, I'll read a paragraph and a half explaining what's going on today. So, A Taste of Honey is the first play by the British dramatist Shelagh Delaney, written when she was 19. It was adapted into an award-winning film of the same title in 1961. Set in Salford in northwest England, it tells the story of Jo, a working-class schoolgirl, and her mother Helen, who is presented as tarty, foul-mouthed, and promiscuous. Helen leaves Jo alone in their new flat after she begins a relationship with Peter, a flashy, moneyed, wide boy who is younger than her. At the same time, Jo, who is white, begins a romantic relationship with Jimmy, a black sailor. Despite being only 15, she tells him she is nearly 18, and therefore nearly old enough to marry without parental permission. He proposes marriage, but then goes to sea, leaving Jo pregnant and alone. She finds lodgings with a gay acquaintance, Geoffrey, who assumes the role of surrogate father. Helen returns after leaving her lover, and the future of Jo's new home is put into question. Okay, so...
Well, first off, what an amazing achievement for a 19-year-old girl. I mean, That's pretty impressive. What's a wide boy?
I don't know. I was hoping you could help me on that one.
Like a bounder or something? Like a man about town, a dandy? I mean, how would we
That makes
describe
sense.
George? George is his name, right?
Peter.
Peter, sorry.
Off to a good start. I at one point thought he might be a pimp, like the way that he was interacting with Helen, but no, I guess that's not the case. Just seems like I mean, he's married, right? Initially, or not? Maybe not actually. His brother's married. It seems like it's an affair, though.
It's unclear. I mean, he very well may be.
Yeah.
Not that would stop Helen from, having a relationship with him.
Or Peter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I said. If Peter, not George, Peter is in fact married, that wouldn't prevent Helen from having a relationship with him.
Yeah, that's what you said, and then I just added that nor would it prevent Peter from having a relationship.
Oh, right. I see what you mean. Yes, of course.
But okay, so you asked about the title. So the literal reference is apparently to the story of Jonathan, the eldest son of King Saul, who ate honey and was punished for it. I'm not particularly familiar with that allusion. Are you?
No.
Okay. And then the way I interpreted it more literally in the story is that Joe is attempting to suck some joy from the marrow of life. I'm very paranoid today about mixing up my idioms, Pancho Sanza style. So, but
for good reason, the people have spoken.
The people...
We'll get to that later.
I think I need
Vox Populi, Vox Dei. Well,
so finally, so it's about her trying to get a taste of honey. That's all. Yeah.
All right. Well, I have a different interpretation based on the song "A Taste of Honey," but we'll get to that later.
Okay.
All right. So here's Shelagh Delaney. Moving on to the next slide. What do you want to say about her, other than, obviously she's a prodigy?
Yeah, I mean, I want to give the caveat that I feel like I'm going to just speak for myself, and perhaps I don't need to be overly humble, but this is definitely, in my mind, a podcast in like the true texting tradition, in the sense that I just read this play this weekend, and I am no scholar on the subject, and this is like a dialogue with a friend discussing what we just read. So,
I didn't read it. I listened to the radio play. So
there you go.
We have different. Well, I think that's a good thing because we have different, perspectives.
Sure, I just mean it's not a play that I'm coming at the viewer with like I'm a scholar on this subject. We're texting about it. So
yeah, of course.
So Shelagh Delaney, I hadn't heard of her. Maybe at some point I might have heard about this play and the fact that it was written by a 19-year-old. I think that may have come up because I think, although it may be that To Kill a Mockingbird was written by Harper Lee at a very young age as well. Either way, I remember it being, that's inspiring, especially when I'm teaching students who are close to that age. So they can see what can be done at that moment. She's from the North, which is quite an important theme. People who aren't from England, we'll get into that a little bit more later, like the significance of being a Northerner. And what do you want to say about her?
Well, I mean, the important thing to me is that she's part of the Irish diaspora, right? As a lot of Northerners are, including, most famously the Beatles from Liverpool, and you know, Morrissey and Marr of the Smiths from Manchester, and not only Morrissey and Marr, but also Joyce and Rourke. All of the Smiths are from this Irish diaspora in the northern part of England, and of course she is from Salford, which is near Manchester, and she too, and her character Joe, who in some ways I think have to imagine as being autobiographical in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
She too calls herself Irish, right? Like as an excuse for her behavior, her sassy talk or something like that. She says, "Well, I'm Irish." And you
And
and
can
the
you?
and the language, the dialogue is really um the most important part of the play, right? The way these characters talk to each other, it's really sharp and witty and rapid fire, at least in the delivery I heard in the radio play. And I'm sure it's probably the same way when you read it on the page.
Well, just so you know, like from about halfway on, I listened and read at the same time, and I
Mm.
was actually relieved that I did because, first of all, because I've read that she definitely intended it to be seen and not read primarily,
Mm-hmm.
but also because I was finding the relationship between Helen and Joe so acerbic that it was quite disturbing just to read. And when I listened, I sensed it to be much more about just a general feeling of banter. I mean, not necessarily that it was always a warm banter, but
Mm-hmm.
it was a conversation. It wasn't like two people just really being
Well, it is
malicious.
acerbic is a good word. Malicious is a good word too. I think it is malicious, and there's a lot of underlying resentment and even hatred. But part of it is performative, as you suggest. It's like they're shit talking, and they're just keeping this dialogue going. It's almost like they have a routine.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
but it's pretty toxic. Uh, I think we'd have to say.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, I'm sure we've talked about this before, but you know that it's a very British thing to take the piss out of people, and
Mm-hmm.
you develop thick skin because you're just constantly like surviving through like insulting and bringing your friends down, cutting them down to size.
Like calling them
um
fucking idiots and that kind of thing.
I guess so, but like, and just at any hint of pride, when anybody says anything like slightly like, yeah, praising about themselves, other people are just like ready to cut them down, you know?
Well, that's also a very Irish thing. The Irish author, I think his name is Roddy Doyle. Um, he talks about how when he was um, giving a talk somewhere in Dublin, this young Irish kid walked up to him and said, "Hey, are you Roddy Doyle?" And he said, "Yes, I am." And he said, "Who gives a shit?" And he walked away.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, taking the
Yeah,
piss
so you
out of
have to be on
someone.
guard all the time.
Right.
I wanted to ask you to just develop the Beatles Irish diaspora connection because I didn't even know about that. I mean, as soon as you said it, I was like, "Oh, McCartney," but
Yeah,
still, maybe you could.
McCartney, Lennon.
Yeah,
Um,
but they're
but
all.
Paul once said, "Yeah, we were mixed with guitars. The Beatles were
Mm,
mixed with guitars," and
mm,
you know, um, it's even more the case with it's more obvious with the Smiths, right? Morrissey, Marr, Joyce, Rourke. These are four Irish lads from Manchester, and
mm,
as I say, for whatever reason, a lot of the Irish diaspora in England is in the north. Liverpool, Manchester,
Yeah.
Salford.
Well, I mean, I guess you could say that these are regions that are less affluent, and so they perhaps the fact that immigrants were settling there is not a huge surprise.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, I mean,
I don't know if that's a
Morrissey has a song. Solo Morrissey has a song. English heart, Irish blood, right? So, and that's probably how McCartney would describe himself too, or you know, uh, a member of the London-based Irish diaspora, John Lydon. He says, I'm a, what does he call himself? A Celtic, no, an Anglo-Saxon Celt. That's what he calls himself, right? So there's like, what did Morrissey say? Irish blood, English heart, or maybe I'm reversing the two, right? So like culturally, they're British, and McCartney's talked about this too. He's got a song called "Give Ireland Back to the Irish," and it begins like, "Great Britain, you are tremendous, and nobody knows like me." So they're culturally very British, but ethnically they're Irish. So there's many, um, you know, British cultural icons of the '60s and beyond fit that description.
well, coming back to Shelley, Sheila,
Sheila.
coming back to Sheila. I think this quote that we've got on the slide is a nice intro to her. She said, "I had strong ideas about what I wanted to see in the theater. We used to object to plays where the factory workers came cap in hand and call the boss sir. Usually North Country people are shown as gormless, whereas in actual fact they are very alive and cynical." Um, so yeah, she's definitely celebrating the working class people of the North, and she's definitely not diminishing their suffering.
Mm-hmm.
She is also keen to show their passion for life and their wit, as she said. So
Yeah.
we both find her attractive, which I think is an important note.
Okay. Well, to clarify, as I said off camera, I found her less attractive in the stills, but when I watched the brief BBC documentary that you sent, and I'll include that in the show notes, I was just very attracted by her mannerisms and her way of speaking. I mean, she's a fascinating
And
person
for
to
the
listen
record,
to.
I am attracted to her through her stills. So I guess the other thing maybe to mention is that she didn't produce much in her career. I think she had like one other noteworthy play. I should know this stuff more, but as I said, I'm just texting. Uh, Apparently, she was described by Michael Patterson as the most A Taste of Honey was described as the most performed play by a post-war British woman playwright.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard her described as like very lazy. Um, Maybe later in her career. I think she had a relationship with someone in the American entertainment industry who was married, and so I think she had to kind of keep her private life private for that
Mm-hmm.
reason. But yeah, I'm clearly not a biographer, but I admire. Oh, and I guess the other maybe interesting thing is I heard she kind of presented herself or like took on the mask of someone who was like a really like working class person who didn't have any real understanding of theater, almost like she was using that as like a marketing tool, where other people have denied that and argued that she actually, that that's a bit of a disguise. I would be curious to like tease out those ideas more, follow that tension.
Mm. Um, I read something yesterday saying that she wrote a Taste of Honey after seeing a performance of either Waiting for Godot or something else.
It wasn't
Maybe
that.
John
It was something
maybe John
else.
Osborne's Don't Look Back in Anger or something like that. The
No, it wasn't either
the
of those.
angry young man.
So,
Well, some
because I read
someone
about this
said
too.
someone
Okay.
said it might have been Godot, but whatever. All right,
No,
let's
here
move
it is.
on.
She wrote. Oh, maybe you're right. Oh, no, Terence Rattigan's variation on a theme.
Okay. Oh right. And she said she was appalled by the insensitivity to homosexuals, so she wanted
Yes.
to write a response to that. All right,
Mm-hmm.
we'll get into that. Let's move on.
Okay.
So, what do we have here? Joan Littlewood's theater workshop.
Yeah. I don't know if you had a chance to come across Joan Littlewood in your research, but
No.
okay, she was apparently a pioneering theater director. She enjoyed working with amateurs. She had a preference for amateurs. Think that workshop had very socialistic tendencies, and that that was its reputation just for putting on very avant-garde, provocative, progressive theater. And based on that reputation, um, Sheila submitted her play to Joan Littlewood, who
Hmm.
immediately took to it and put it on soon afterwards. So it just seems like she's a very pivotal figure
This is
in.
a great quote. Why
Yeah,
don't you read
you
that
want
quote for us?
Sure. So Littlewood said, "Before I die, I'd like to push open the door so that people can see the absurdities of the calcified turds of the establishment and recognize the genius in themselves."
The calcified turds of the
Yeah,
establishment. That's brilliant.
it is.
Beautiful.
I like it as well.
All right. Let's
So yeah,
move
we've
on.
given our props to her, and she probably deserves a deeper dive at some other point.
Yeah.
Um, quick history of the productions, which again you may know more than me about some of these. It premiered in Stratford at the Theatre National, which we just mentioned. Then it moved to Brighton. Had two back-to-back runs in Broadway, one of which starred Angela Lansbury as Helen, Joan Playwright as Jo. I guess those are both famous actresses.
Angela
Um,
Lansbury, Murder She Wrote.
yes, I never watched it, but yeah.
Neither did I, but my mom always had it on.
Okay. Uh, then the reason I mentioned this 2000 production at Watford Palace is because I know you're not as much of a The Office fanboy as I am, but the character Neil, who's like the more suave boss,
Mm-hmm.
um, who's like the foil for Ricky Gervais, David Brent. Yeah, so that guy is played by Patrick Baladi, who played
Mm.
Peter in this production. Then we've had it was performed at the Royal National Theatre, which you may know is like the probably the most well known and well respected theatre company in England in 2014. And this year it is being performed or has already been performed at the Royal Exchange Theatre in Manchester. So I also just
Bringing
wanted to
it all
ask you,
back home.
yeah, I just wanted to ask you if you, because it seems like the film was also a really big deal. Did you get a chance to follow that or like read about that?
Well, I mean, I didn't watch it. I saw like opening sequence and maybe a couple of clips, but it's
Yeah.
a Tony Richardson film.
Okay.
Tony Richardson being the husband or partner of Vanessa Redgrave and
Okay.
mother of Miranda Richardson. For whatever that's worth.
I know. I
But
think it was a.
it
Yeah.
was a pretty influential film. And then there was a song. I don't know if the song was in the movie, or it must have been, right, or maybe it was written for the Broadway version of the play. But anyway, as we'll discuss later, it was covered by the Beatles. I think Barbara Streisand covered it as well. And so anyway, because of at least the Beatles version, I have a different take on the meaning of A Taste of Honey, but we'll get to that.
Okay.
Let's move. So reception, here's a
Yeah.
critical
It's.
notice.
It seems like, predictably, more conservative critics were disgusted by it. I saw words like cannibal to describe Sheila, and just emphasizing the vulgarity as a negative thing. But I have clipped one positive review that came out at the time, which called it a work of complete exhilarating originality, giving a real escape from the middle class vacuum of the West End. So I think that's clearly what Sheila was hoping. This is
Was it first performed at an East End theater? I think she mentioned something about the East End in that documentary. Did I hear that wrong?
I just don't want us to confuse it with the original theater, which is Royal Stratford East. Maybe
East,
that.
yeah. So
Yeah, but
that's
Royal
East
Stratford
End,
East
right?
is not in London. I don't think.
Oh,
Yeah, so I think like it initially. Oh no, it's in the London borough of Newham. So yeah, that makes sense what you're saying.
East End, right? I mean, you're familiar with the working class soap opera, basically EastEnders.
Yeah.
So that's what we'll learn in another slide or two. Another slide or two is called kitchen sink realism, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
so I guess that's appropriate. This is interesting. You've found a picture of a looks like a book jacket.
Mm-hmm.
The title of the book is "The Beat Generation and the Angry Young Men." So they're like finding connections between John Osborne and that crowd and the Beats.
Yeah. Which makes sense. I mean, chronologically, anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I didn't really know about this movement, the Angry Young Men, but I can just read from this slide, which says that following World War II, the term "angry young men" was used to describe lower class university graduates who could not find any career prospects um, in the conditions of post war unemployment and still prevailing British conservatism. And authors such as John Wayne, not Wayne, but Wain, Kingsley Amis, John Osborne, expressed the anger and disappointment of the deceived generation.
Have you ever seen Don't Look Back in Anger?
By the way, it's not Don't Look Back in Anger, it's Look Back in Anger.
I mean, Look Back in Anger. Don't Look Back in Anger is an Oasis song.
I know,
But have
probably
you?
it's referencing it. No, but I haven't. Have you?
Yeah, I saw a production of it as an undergraduate, which is probably why I confused the name. But it's it's about an angry young man,
Yeah.
right?
Did it
Look
make an
back in
impression on
anger.
you?
Yeah, it was powerful theater, and the one of the characters refers to Brando, right? You look like Marlon Brando, he says. That got a laugh from the audience, but it's kind of like um
What was the point being
around
made there?
around that time there was a Brando movie called, I want to say, The Wild Ones, and it was about a motorcycle gang, and the name of the gang was the Beatles, and so this was an influence on the Beatles, right? Like they, with among other influences like Buddy Holly's Crickets, and of course they changed the spelling, but all of these ideas were percolating at the time, right? Like
Mm.
this rebellion, and rebel without a cause, and all of
Well,
that. A
and
lot
I,
of
I'm just thinking
angry
about,
young men on both sides of the Atlantic.
and I'm just thinking of the angry Marlon Brando in Streetcar. You
Yeah,
know,
that too, absolutely.
so it's another good connection
Yeah.
for me.
So you know, this is, I don't know. In a way, it's like it's part of the rock and roll generation. This play and the work of Shelagh Delaney. Maybe it's kind of um, countercultural, or offering some kind of like alternative to the mainstream, right? So the association with the Beats is not so far fetched.
Sure, sure.
All right,
If anything,
let's
I would say
move.
maybe this is more rooted in the working class than maybe the Beats could
Oh,
claim to be,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, not to
Yeah,
say
it's
there weren't
more.
Beats who were familiar with that life. I mean, even Neil Cassidy, he was more
Yeah,
working class, right? But I mean,
but
if you look at,
the class issue is more to the fore in the Angry Young Men, I would say. Like
yeah,
in the British version of whatever this cultural trend was, class was more front and center, let's say.
do I dare make
Which,
any comparisons with modern iconic angry men like Andrew Tate, Tommy Robinson? Do we want to even go there?
well, I don't know enough about either of those characters to say, but you can make whatever comment you want.
Well, I guess I would just say that the angry young men that are iconic in today's media landscape, they don't have the same pairing with literature. That's one thing. Or maybe they do in Jordan Peterson's case. I mean, he does. He's not young though.
No, he's not.
But there is this like male anger, right? That is arguably counterculture in the sense that it's not, its main outlet is not legacy media. Um, yeah, but obviously it's more associated with the right than the left. Although again, these terms can be annoying and stifling. But
Well, I mean, I don't know how deeply you want to get into that, but a lot of the rhetoric in that area seems to me supportive of the establishment. It's not like rebellious in any way. It might purport to be, or try to present itself as, but
yeah,
in many
yeah.
cases it's just like I mean, Peterson in particular, what is he but an apologist for the status quo at the end of the day?
Well, I guess again, I'm no fan of Peterson, but I guess the arguably counterculture positions would be like going against the woke corporate link
Okay, yeah.
and
But
even
there's a
questioning vaccines.
okay, but there's a branch of the establishment that cloaks itself in that rhetoric, or disguises its true intentions.
Sure, sure, I would agree with that as well.
All right, so kitchen sink realism. What do you want to say about that?
And again, be happy to defer to you here as well. Just that it comes from apparently this movement of painters in England, one of which was this guy John Bratby, who painted stuff like kitchen sinks, and so obviously it's just like a way of, I'm describing this really poorly, but of explaining like real gritty realism and like
I
emphasis
did.
on the domestic.
I didn't know that. I didn't know it had its origin in the visual arts,
Yeah.
painting in particular. That's interesting. I mean, I always thought it was like because, a lot of these dramas were domestic, like
Mm-hmm.
A Taste of Honey. It takes place,
Right.
in the home, which probably includes a kitchen sink somewhere, right? Like
Right.
I don't know, it could be like the dinner table. It could be dinner table realism or living room realism, but they chose the kitchen sink as the controlling image. And this
Yeah.
is an interesting painting.
I mean, I think that's one of the things that definitely stood out to me about this play is that you really feel like you're confined to this small, shabby flat.
Yeah, it's
There's
kind
not.
of
There's no.
claustrophobic, isn't it?
Yeah,
You get
absolutely. You don't
kind of a
go
trapped
out.
feeling.
Yeah, especially when and you hear about just how dire the conditions are. You know, the kitchen is somewhere down the hall. Everything's kind of communal and yeah, somewhere you have to walk away to get to.
Hmm.
And people don't exactly know how things work, like lights and ovens, and yeah. So
Right.
sounds very Dostoevskian in many ways, and his poor folks.
As we will discuss. All right,
Yeah.
tell us about Salford.
Again, okay. What I will tell you then is you probably know that a little bit about the North-South divide in the UK. And I did a little bit of like reaching out to some friends of the show. Like, sorry about that. Like Aiden and Steve, and yeah, they both just spoke so highly of people from the North as being like, in contrast to people from the South, warmer, more sincere, less pretentious. If I can quote Steve, because I like the way he wrote it after this long vocal message. He said, "In a nutshell, North is real / earthy, South is fake, performative."
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and obviously,
Didn't one of your mates also talk about speech patterns? Like, I think this came up during the Faulty Towers episode from, was it season 2? Someone was talking about how the use of like um profanity and vulgar language is just more openly accepted in one area or the other.
yeah,
What was it, more so in the North than the South? Am I remembering that correctly?
I don't know, but listeners may. So,
Oh, okay. No,
um,
it was your friend that recommended
Tom.
the This Is England uh movie, and
So
the
that's
other one.
Aiden. Yeah,
Okay.
Aiden recommended This Is England, and then Tom recommended another like really dark film that we watched, Dead
Same
something, the
director,
Dead Man's
Shane.
Shoes.
Right, Shane, whatever his name is.
Yes, that's the
But
Irish
but
pronunciation.
what was the distinction there about speech and informal language and uh, maybe slang and vulgar, profane language?
I don't know, but I mean, when I studied in
Hmm.
Leeds, you definitely get a lot more like love at the end of a phrase. You know, like as like so the when they're or if you're buying something at the shop, like they'll address you as love and stuff like
Mm.
that. So
Friendlier.
yeah, uh,
like the
and poorer
southern
and poorer.
like the southern U.S. stereotype, right? Southern hospitality, which is, you know, in some cases a myth, but there definitely is a difference in the states between North and South.
Yeah, I mean, so many nations you see these kind of divisions. I mean, I think of Italy, you know, and like how the South is poorer but kind of more open, and the
Hmm.
North is North is has more money and but is like more Germanic and kind of tight-fisted. I don't know.
Yeah.
Uh, let's read this quote. The language is alive. It's virile. Is that how you pronounce that?
Hmm.
It lives and it breathes, and you know exactly where it's coming from. It's
She says that in the BBC documentary I just
okay,
watched.
and she's looking good here as well. But yeah, you can see the kind of council estate in the picture on the left,
Right. Yeah.
and yeah, it's grim. You know, you'd say a lot of the jobs would be industry jobs,
Industrial.
right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so it ain't no joke.
Hmm. All right, let's get into the characters. Here are Joe and Helen. Joe being the daughter and Helen being the, what did you call her? The tardy bit
That's
of
what
crumpet.
Wikipedia called her. Yeah, I think
Hmm.
you added the crumpet, but
Yeah. Well, that comes up. That's a line. She says that about Peter. She says, he went off with his bit of crumpet.
because you know the word trumpet. Isn't there a word trumpet or something like that? Or there's a word something like
Strumpet.
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 Yes, thank you. I was like, wait, I'm only getting an instrument here.
You're going to get us
Um,
another unsubscribe.
uh, um, but yeah, so it's funny because you got the word strumpet. I know that word more so than
Hmm.
like a crumpet. I just think of the
No,
delicious baked good.
bit of crumpet. That's a, that's a, I guess it's synonymous with tart.
Have you had a crumpet, by the
Well, in what sense?
way? In the sense of the baked good,
Actually, I'm
they're
not sure.
delicious. They're really good.
I
They're
imagine.
not sweet. They just kind of have holes at the top.
Hmm.
Uh, you just put them in a toaster, and then you could just put some anything on them. Like, but even if you put like some butter on it, because it has all these holes, the butter will just like drip inside of it. And yeah, we'll have to do a UK trip and have some tea and crumpets. But yeah, so what was your impression of both of them, maybe individually and their relationship?
Well,
Specifically Helen, I think, because I think she's kind of takes center stage when we first open the play.
neither one is particularly sympathetic. Like
Joe's
Joe.
sympathetic to me.
Well, more so than Helen, but later we see her claws come out too. I mean, I was going to save this for one of the other characters that we'll mention in a minute, but I mean, basically, to me, the only sympathetic character is Jeffrey, right? Like by the end of the play, I'm pretty disgusted with everybody. Maybe even him too, because he's such a weak. Well, I don't know. Maybe he's not that weak as a person or character, but he is in a way. Like he
I
kind of
mean, that's an
folds too
interesting.
easily.
I think that your takeaway is obviously like legitimate,
Hmm.
as legitimate as mine. But I would argue that Delaney would like us to empathize with all of the characters, and that she doesn't
Sure,
have.
yes, yeah, on some level.
I mean, except for Peter, because he's just so nasty. But I mean, and
Well,
Helen's pretty nasty too. But I guess
yeah,
well, Joe certainly is sympathetic to me, and Jeffrey is certainly a positive character.
that's what I said.
Sure, but I would say Joe. I don't think she's done anything that's really like. I mean, we can debate what you called her nastiness, but so
Did I say
again,
that?
she says her claws come out.
Yeah, okay.
But anyway, I like Joe. Helen, is there anything that what is redeemable about Helen? I mean, we assume that she's had a tough life, so that in one sense
Well,
makes her sympathetic.
she didn't tolerate the puritanism of her
Yeah,
of her husband, so give her credit for.
I knew you would like that.
Yeah, well, she
That's fine. That's
she
fine.
took the initiative of enjoying the sensual life with
She's
an
very much
idiot.
given up on life. It seems like, right? I mean, it's like
No, I don't see that at all. She's a good time gal. She's living for the moment. She's a party girl.
Let me elaborate then what I mean by it. It's like she can't really deal with reality. Like she just escapes from reality, like through alcohol and
affairs.
As you said, maybe living in the moment in some way, that could be positive or negative. But the way that she's dealing with, like she can't deal with real discussions. She can't really, she's obviously not a good role model for Joe. She's not able to be a mother.
She's racist.
Yeah, we can get into that. But no, I mean she's not especially. I mean, I guess the thing that's the most frustrating about her is how abusive and dismissive she is towards Joe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And she makes like some slight advances towards something like kindness at the end, but even there, she's doing it like at the expense of Jeffrey, and
then falls back on, her.
Well, I think the ending is ambiguous. So
her concern for appearances and. All right, here's Peter.
Yeah, so
AKA George.
Yeah, exactly. George Costanza.
Where's his eye patch?
That's true. I wonder if some productions declined to use that.
It's in the text, isn't it?
And it is in the text.
Jeff calls him the Pirate King, doesn't he? So, like, it'd be weird if he didn't have the eye patch, but this particular slide, he's not.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is a shot, but I've got some.
Maybe this is George, not Peter.
I've got some three choice quotes to show his lacerations of the various other major characters. So first is, I'm not having that bloody slut at our place.
I wrote that one down too.
Okay, so that's an attack on Joe then. And don't bring that little fruitcake parcel.
Yeah.
Lovely bit of homophobia there. And then even later on, he completely turns on Helen and says, "Look at that sour-faced old bitch." So...
Interestingly, he's younger than her, so they've got like a cougar young man dynamic going. I mean, it's not clear how much she's 40, I think.
Yeah,
so
I think that's right.
He's late 30s, maybe.
I think younger than that. It sounded like it was a 10-year gap.
Maybe so. I wasn't following along on the page, so maybe I missed something. But it's clear he was younger, which I don't know. Why did she include that? There must be some reason. Maybe just like the unconventionality of their relationship.
Yep. Which is interesting because in itself that would seem like a positive, because you could say that this play is championing many of the outsider tendencies and outsider qualities, but in his case it's not really so much so.
Yeah, and there's something dysfunctional about all the family dynamics,
Yeah. So what sympathies do we have with him? I mean, I guess we could say he doesn't really care that much about appearances, like keeping up appearances.
He's a player.
Yeah, but I mean, he's ready to marry and share his wealth with someone who's from a different financial bracket.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but
How do you think he acquired his wealth? Did he inherit it? Is he just like the son of some rich industrialist, or
he is
is he like
described. I'm looking through the text right now. I think something was said like he's a car salesman, something like that.
mm, yeah, I could
Oh
believe
yeah.
that.
Enter Peter, a brash car salesman, cigar in mouth. That's his first
Mm,
stage directions.
okay, I could believe that. So he's probably upper middle class as opposed to their lower class.
Well, again, I would say maybe if we're talking about these as like financial stratifications rather than like
Mm-hmm.
educational ones.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I guess his vocab does seem a bit more posh. Like he says, "What on earth made you choose such a ghastly district?"
Mm-hmm.
When he comes into the flat the first time.
Well, yeah, I meant it economically.
Yeah, but again, we do have moments. I'm just reading it now, and like I'm seeing language that almost seems out of step with what you would assume like a really working class northern language to be. Like Helen says, "The only consolation I can find in your immediate presence is your ultimate absence." Which
Yeah,
again,
that
you don't
was
know if at moments like that, if that's like Shelley or Sheila just can't help herself to like get in some kind of more memorable quotes
yeah.
at the expense of like that maybe really authentic, gritty language. I don't know.
Well, I mean, Helen, like all people, could be capable of uttering something eloquent from time to time,
100%,
you
of
know?
course.
Yeah.
But yeah, he
All
says
right.
to her, "Helen, you don't seem to realize, what an opportunity I'm giving you. The world is littered with women I've rejected. Women still
Hmm.
anxious to indulge my little vices and excuse my less seemly virtues." So yeah, it's yeah,
Quite a
interesting
guy.
stuff. Yeah.
All right, boy.
Yes. So we're coming to the part of the show where I explain my pseudonym. I was gonna go with Black Boy, but I thought that might be it might require so much contextualization in our modern age that I decided to just
Hmm.
go a little bit less controversial and go with Boy. Of course,
Thanks for that.
yeah, but I mean, I do find it obviously it's very strange that on the one hand, it's like maybe Sheila's being progressive by including a black character and an interracial relationship. And on the other hand, there are things that seem very regressive, like the fact that she doesn't name him. We just hear his name in a conversation between Joe and Jeff very late on in the play.
Chema.
Yeah, so I don't know. He's again, there are things about him that we can commend in terms of like how he's portrayed to us. Like he seems quite educated. He references Othello. He he's able to like again he pokes fun at himself. Like they when and his like African ancestry, but at the same time says, "Look, I'm from Wales." Um,
Mm-hmm.
what did
He's
you
a
make
male.
of?
He's a male. He's a male nurse.
Yeah, what did you think of him? And you can take that
I
any way you
liked
want.
him. I liked him, and I thought he legitimately cared for Joe. But then
Yeah,
by the time we get to Act Two, I mean, are we sure that he just abandoned her, or maybe he got you know his what's it called? His tour of duty got extended or something. He got redeployed, as they say. I don't know. He's in
right,
the Navy. We should point out, like
right.
maybe he does intend to come back. Maybe he will come back. Do we know for sure he's not coming back? They seem pretty sure. They seem pretty certain he's not. In Act Two, but why? Like, how long has it been?
I think that's more like not necessarily an indictment of Jimmy, but more just like this is kind of more likely scenario, like for anyone, like that he didn't know, right, that he got her pregnant. So
Mm-hmm.
that would be like worse, obviously. But that I think that was like, given the circumstances, in most cases, probably the guy doesn't come back. Who knows, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what did you think about the omission of a name?
Yeah, that's strange. Like, why is he just called Boy? Because is that because that's how Joe refers to him? I have a boy, a boyfriend. Yeah, he should be listed as Jimmy, but
And
whatever. Maybe that's to emphasize his otherness and his status, his social status. Maybe that in itself is a social criticism.
I think these questions are like, yeah, I think these questions are interesting. And if it's still on like IGCSE curriculum in 2024, given the climate we're in, you'd have to say that it's not being interpreted for as badly as maybe some people might take it, right? It's like still being seen as like something that more on the progressive side. I'm sorry if I want you to like call me out on some of this shit that I'm saying, because I feel like I'm,
Well, I
yeah,
I noticed it too. I noticed it too. Like, why is he called Boy? Like, he has a
yeah.
name. We know his name's Jimmy. Why don't they just list him as Jimmy? But again, I thought, well, maybe that in itself is a social criticism. It's like, as far as um, British culture of the time was concerned, he was just Boy.
Yeah, and she's too smart, and the references, the things that he says, are too smart to suggest that she's viewing him as
Mm-mm.
not right. Because I mean, do you object to the gross clasps of the lascivious Moor? Yeah, I mean, like, yeah,
No, actually, I said Jeff was the most sympathetic character. Maybe second to him, or maybe even before him. I would mention Jimmy. Like, he was maybe my favorite character.
yeah. We just don't get to know him enough, maybe in the same way
Yeah,
we,
but
yeah,
that makes him more intriguing too. Like, you know, what's his story? Like, how did he end up there? Well, okay, he's from Wales, and he's, I guess, calling it, is Salford on the coast? Is it a seaport? I mean, it's probably close to it if it's near Manchester, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, he's obviously very caring, right? I mean, he was insisting on taking care of her health just like Jeffrey does, and
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Now that you mention that, it's like you've got two male caregivers in, um, well, one in each of the two acts. Let's put it that way, right? Jimmy in Act One, and then Jimmy is
mm-hmm,
replaced by Jeff in Act Two.
mm-hmm,
I hadn't thought about that, but there's like a male caregiver role,
yeah.
almost a protector.
Um, by the way, the Pirate King, it sounds like that was Boy, because I see he says, "And who is the Pirate King?" So that was
No, no,
actually,
I think he's talking about uh, Peter when he comes in with the patch.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, you said it was Jeffrey, I think, that said that, no? But anyway, it was Boy.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
see. So he see. Oh, right. So yeah, Jimmy encounters Peter in Act One, like they run
right.
into each other. Yeah. Okay. Fine. All right. Let's move.
Well, he
Let's
just last thing he
move.
says, "There isn't another man like me anywhere. I'm one on his own," which is another
Hmm.
quite interesting line if we're talking about the status of outsiders.
Oh, I know what else I wanted to say about Jimmy. In the Broadway version, or in some version, he was portrayed by Billy D. Williams.
Yeah, I saw that.
Interesting.
What is he? Oh, he's known for playing somebody in Star Wars, right?
Yeah. Lando. He was Han
I'm
Solo's
not.
buddy.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
not in that
I
world,
don't
but
remember his full name, but he was Han Solo's buddy. All right, moving on.
I'll just one more thing I'll say.
Hmm.
Just like maybe we're more sensitive to that term "boy" as well, like as Americans, because we know that term can be used like for
Mm-hmm.
slaves and so on, right? So
Right.
maybe it had a
Yeah.
different context.
All right, and there's Jeffrey. He does look like a fruitcake here with that. I don't know. That face is strange.
Well, this got me in kind of moderately cold sweats because I'm reading in this like crazy fear of LGBT world, and there's already a tangential reference to homosexuality in A Streetcar Named Desire.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember, but Blanche's dead boyfriend from when she was young turned out to be gay,
Mm-hmm.
And this is even more explicit. At the same time, I feel like I can probably get away with teaching it because I know that my students won't object, and it's not. But it's something that could get me in trouble teaching this, even if it's on the Cambridge curriculum and we're a Cambridge school. So, just thought I would let you know about that little side note.
Oh. Hmm.
Yeah,
Daddy Putin might not like it.
yeah, and I don't think he even cares, but I think it's just this absurd, need that we've had now to like make both parties stronger than maybe they need to be, right? Like the Europe has to define itself by being super pro LGBTQ, and Russia has to be its counter, even if these are like not at all reflections of how people actually feel, which I think most people just want to like live and let live.
Well, what I like about um the depiction of this character is how, I guess it's mostly how he and Joe interact, like she's open minded, but she has some questions. It's like, what do you do? It's so strange to me. Like explain what it's all about, right?
Mm.
So it's very realistic, I think.
Yeah,
Um
absolutely.
not like, oh, I'm so sophisticated I don't even have any questions because I know all about it.
Yeah,
No, she's not even, I mean, she lies about her age. She's what, 15, 16 at the most? So she doesn't know anything about anything, right? She just had her first sexual experience, so of course she's going to have some questions, but she's an inquisitive, curious, open-minded girl, so she just frankly and directly asks him, "So what's it all about? What do you do? I mean, what's that
yeah, that's right.
lifestyle like?" It's not like it's not like she's in lockstep with all of the current agenda, it's just like
Right,
she's an
right.
open-minded person that is accepting of people who are different from her. So
Yep,
it makes it more real and authentic.
absolutely. And their mutual kind of vulnerability, um, at the same time paired with a quiet inner strength, is uh is appealing about both of them.
And
Yeah.
he's not yes, and he's not strictly defining himself as this or that, like he even wants to marry her, and he feels like protective of her, and not only husbandly but almost fatherly, right? Like he's not like, militant in any way. Morrissey talked about that too. Like he didn't like the militant gay kind of ideology that was beginning to become more popular in the 80s. He would probably, relate more to this kind of character.
Yeah, although we obviously sympathize with Jeffrey because he can't really, he's living in a time where he has to have this really closeted struggle, whereas you'd hope that in modern day, in many countries, he'd be able to live a more full expression of his identity and preference. But I think, they've both clearly been damaged by the society that they're living in, and they've forged this partnership through that, and through an affection for each other, and it's quite impressive. I mean, I think this is one of the more impressive parts of the play, is like the degree that she's able to portray this relationship.
But at the same time, she treats him somewhat contemptuously on occasion, right? Like some of her remarks are pretty insulting.
Yeah.
But then it's like she quickly after and he does the same too, right? Like he gives it back to her, but then they quickly, like seconds later, they're reaffirming their affection for each other, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So that there's an interesting dynamic there as well.
Yeah, agreed.
I mean, they take the piss out of each other, but they follow up with a love, as you say.
And the concluding nursery rhyme that she recitates is like a tribute to him, right?
Right.
Is recitate the correct word, or should I say recite? Can you say both? Pancho Sanza.
I would have said recite, but I'm not rearing.
I'm just rolling, baby. I'm just rolling.
I'm not rearing at the bit like you.
Recitate is borrowing from Latin. Anyway, it is a term.
Recitare. All right, let's move.
All right.
What do we got here?
Okay, so here's my clever intertextuality. So one of the concerns that Jo has throughout is this fear that her kid will be a half-wit. Because Helen has dropped these hints about how Jo's father wasn't the brightest. And it just made me think of Smirdyakov being the fruit of Fyodor, Enrique, and Elizaveta. That's all. That's as deep as that's going.
From Brothers Karamazov, of course.
Right. Yeah. But what did you make of that whole running theme?
Well, I didn't know whether to believe Helen or not. Like, is she just busting Jo's balls, as it were? Like, just trying to goad and provoke her? Like, what? It's a strange thing to admit to, but she seems almost proud of it. Like, yeah, he was an idiot, he was a half-wit, but she seems to be very she remembers her first experience very fondly. She's like, there's nothing like the first time,
I don't think she is lying, though. That's the thing about
you don't.
I don't think she's just busting her balls, and then they make the references to Jo's eyes, like something might be up funky about Jo's eyes that she inherited from her dad. I don't know. Anyway.
Could be. Yeah. All right. So, of course, we have to talk about the connection with the Smiths, and in particular Morrissey, who was very strongly influenced by Shelagh Delaney. In fact, he said, at least 50% of my reason for writing can be blamed on Shelagh Delaney.
Yeah, pretty powerful.
Yeah. And so we found some songs that either reference her writing in the lyrics, or they feature a picture of the author on the sleeve. So we've got her on the Louder Than Bombs compilation. She's also featured on the Girlfriend in a Coma sleeve. I don't think there's any reference to her in the lyrics. This Night Has Opened My Eyes is supposedly a retelling of, part of the play, something to do with the baby. There's Girlfriend in a Coma, which features a picture of Ms. Delaney and this great quote, "Work is a 4-letter word." I don't think that's a reference to Ms. Delaney, but anyway. Reel Around the Fountain, which, as I told you off camera, I've listened to in the past day. I've listened to about 50 times. What a great song. But it has the wonderful line that Jimmy says to Joe, you just got dark there.
Yeah, I've
Your
been
lights are
noticing
totally
my.
out.
If you want to wait a second, you can entertain the audience, and I'll turn the light on.
Yeah, you should turn the light on.
All right, keep talking.
Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna entertain the audience for 10 seconds here. So yeah, Reel Around the Fountain includes. I mean, it's a direct quote from the play. I dreamed about you last night, and I fell out of bed twice. Which is again, that's something that Jimmy says to Joe in his romantic, poetic way, and Morrissey filched those two lines for "Reel Around the Fountain,"
I
which
wonder if they ever met.
I'm glad to have revisited. Morrissey and Shelagh
Yeah,
Delaney. Wouldn't surprise me.
yeah.
I'll bet they did at some point. But yeah, good question. All right, and okay, so before you suggested this as our text, I had heard of it, but I never read it or listened to it. But of course, I was familiar with the Beatles cover version of the song "A Taste of Honey," which is on their first album, "Please Please Me," sung by Paul. And so, yeah, if you listen to the song, there's a part that says, "I will return. I will come back for the honey and you." Who could that be if not Jimmy?
Right.
Right? Like, who's singing that if not Jimmy? I will return. Yes, I will return. I'll come back for the honey and you. It's got to be Jimmy, right? He's going to come back and get some more of that honey. So I don't know. I didn't research the song and its connection to the play, but who else could it be? It has to be talking about Jimmy. So this is maybe another reason why I tend to think he might be coming back. It's not, totally hopeless to think that he will return, as the song says. Okay, and then does this picture mean anything to you?
It came up on my Google image search, so
Exactly.
looking forward to you explaining.
Well, this is the band A Taste of Honey, which maybe I'd heard of them before, but I didn't know much about them. But yeah, you do a search and they come up, right? You do a search for A Taste of Honey, whether you're searching images or YouTube or whatever, and this band comes up. And so the main member is I think her name is Janice Marie Johnson, and it's this beautiful gal on the left here, and she's an amazing, funky bassist and a good songwriter and singer too. So she had a band called A Taste of Honey, and probably their biggest hit was a cover of the Japanese song Ski-Aki,
Nice, I'll have
which
to check it
you
out.
can listen to on YouTube. But yeah, I
For
was
now.
really, really glad to learn about them. And yeah,
That
I've
was a
just got
reference
some.
to the status of YouTube, by the way, in Russia. It's
What's that?
it's we can only use YouTube now with VPN, and
Oh, really?
yeah, and even that we don't know how long that'll last. And just I thought I should mention. Did you hear about this guy Pavel Durov today?
Mm-mm.
So Pavel Durov is like the wealthiest Russian entrepreneur in the world. Um,
Okay.
he left Russia a few years ago, but he's the co-founder and CEO of Telegram, and he also
Oh, yeah.
co-founded like the Russian version of Facebook called VK.
Okay.
Um, he has citizenship now in 4 countries, like outside of Russia:
Mm-hmm.
UAE, France, and Saint Kitts and Nevis. Anyways, he was arrested in France today, and
For what?
so this is like interesting. I mean, people are still at the level of speculation mainly, but it's the official charges are stuff like abetting terrorism and sex crime and stuff like that. But
Mm.
the one perspective on this is basically that this is like the West cracking down on free speech, because Durov has like been consistently against like, well, in support of absolute privacy, and like refused to cooperate with with conceding identities and so on.
Oh,
Or
I'm sure that's probably what it is then.
so it's like really people are just saying this is like France is going full 1984, and it's
What's the
concerning
Russian
and disturbing.
government's position? Do they support him or?
Well, Medvedev, who's always worthy of a shitty quote. I mean, he's turned into this like rabid pro-war guy. But he basically said like Durov told me once, or said to us, that he was gonna leave Russia because he wanted more freedom. Well, now he sees what it's like on the other side,
Hmm.
something like that. So he doesn't really like him because of his like because he distanced himself from Russia, but
Hmm.
and he said something like, and when you're Russian, you're always a Russian. Like you can't escape this label or kind of this identity. Like they will get you no matter what.
Well, that's
So
is
it's
he
a
wrong
interesting
about
takes.
that? That doesn't sound like a shitty quote to me. That's pretty
No, but
good.
I don't. I mean, if you just see this guy's like, he's like as pro-war as they come. I mean, he's
Oh,
like
well,
really
yeah.
like he's really
Yeah.
brutal with a lot of his rhetoric. But I
Hmm.
understand your point too.
Yeah.
But watch that space.
Okay. Okay. Well, yeah, this slide just includes some random notes. Many of these I think we already covered. The Irish diaspora, Othello, which Jimmy references, and then he's also called by Joe a black beast of a prince from darkest Africa. Some of these um,
Yeah, and or
phrases
there's
are
still a bit of
interesting.
jungle in you somewhere.
Yes, right.
And
That
here's
was
the thing,
another one.
right? I feel like this kind of language would definitely trigger a certain reader, but for me, I'm pretty forgiving of stuff like that, because I
Oh,
don't know,
she's
like
not. She's
yeah, and I
not.
just
I
think we
mean,
need to chill out on stuff like that. Like I'm always joking about like Liliana being like, a Tatar warrior and stuff like that,
yeah,
and so I mean, I feel like people have to have the right to talk like this to their partners. I mean, this is like banter again.
yeah, and she likes it. It's like it's like that Seinfeld joke, right? It's not racist if you like the group you're talking about.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, I think it's also more tongue in cheek than like an actual
Of
Africa
course,
fetish. Yeah,
of course. Well, even if it is, she likes it, right?
but I don't agree that. I think you it can. I don't think it's great to like.
People can't have preferences.
They can have preferences, but you know what I'm saying. It can be dehumanizing as well to like create some fantasy around a person. It's like the whole like black men have huge cocks. Like I don't think that many, like a lot of people don't really like that stereotype, even like in the black community. Anyways, we should get off. We should move on from that.
Maybe you know more about that than me. Anyway, Othello, listeners may recall, was discussed in the final episode of season 2, episode 20.
As we talked about our IGCSE curriculum.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, all our texts seem to come from there. So we mentioned the eye patch, male nurse, ring on a string. This was something I picked up on. You know, the ring that Jimmy gives Joe is too big, so she puts it on a string and wears it around her neck. But of course, the reason she's doing that is she wants to hide it from Helen.
I thought you were going to say to draw attention to her breasts.
Her breastises. I highlighted this quote, "the devil's own," because there was an example of synchronicity. Like on TV, there was this movie from the 90s with Brad Pitt and Harrison Ford called The Devil's Own. And just after I turned that off, I was listening to the radio play, and there was that banter between Jeffrey and Joe, and he actually used the phrase "the devil's own." It was like, wow, whoa, that's not supposed to happen.
Nice.
Yeah, we talked about being married to a Puritan, idiot, half-wit. This is interesting. A little Victorian melodrama. That's how the domestic scene is described, I think, by Peter. I think he's talking about, I'm going to get out of here. I don't want to be around this little Victorian melodrama. Could that be used to describe the whole play? Maybe so. This phrase...
But isn't that kind of what she's like trying to rebel against as a writer?
Yeah, but maybe she's using it ironically or facetiously, you know. Had you ever heard this phrase? A bun in the oven, of course, but a cake in the stove? I thought that was cute. Clever.
No.
I hadn't heard that one. You've heard a bun in the oven, of course, right?
Yeah.
For pregnant. But a cake in the stove, that's good. Talked about fruitcake. This quote, can you give us the full quotation? In this country, you were telling me about it the other day.
Yeah, let me pull that up.
It's not.
Sorry.
It's not it's not what you know. It's who you know. Or the more you know, the less you earn, or something.
Yeah, in
like
this country, the more you know, the less you earn.
You right. Know? Yeah.
Quite a prescient quote, certainly.
Yeah. Seems like pretty much every country. I highlighted the phrase art student, which is how Jeffrey is described. Of course, Jo herself does sketches, right? So she's kind of an artist as well. This is interesting that, you know, one of the things she kind of shouts out during one of these animated discussions with Jeffrey: I don't want to be a mother. I don't want to be a woman. Interesting that the female writer included that bit of dialogue. And the only thing civilization couldn't do anything about: women. In fairness, this is Jeffrey, the character of Jeffrey talking, but it's Shelagh Delaney writing it. What do you think she's trying to say? Any comment on any of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first quote is like clearly like the burden of being a mother and a woman.
Sure.
And I will say that, like, again, this is very humanizing because you've got these people who are in such dire living conditions, but they're so full-throated, so unrestrained. Their soliloquies are like demanding life, you know? And
well, it's like that quote about Salford, right? It's virile. It's
yeah.
You know exactly where it's coming from. It's real.
She'll flush the baby down the toilet. Like, I mean, saying she's not afraid to say the shit that a lot of people would just, you know, try to suppress.
Especially today, all the moral scolds. Oh, how could you say that? You know, well,
Yeah,
people think uncomfortable thoughts, and
yeah,
they're being expressed in very realistic kitchen sink language. So get
amen.
over it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, the
And
other
on
one I
that
think
note,
is just a barb.
sure. All right, let's go to the mailbag.
Woo! My favorite part of the show.
We got some interesting comments on the YouTube channel that we thought we would share with you listeners out there. One was a comment on a very old episode. We're glad to see that people are reviewing the back catalog. But El Vengador 2275 says, I do agree that Synecdoche, New York is a hilarious film once you become familiar with it. For example, the scene in which Caden's daughter dies. But we need to see humor in Charlie Kaufman as a protection to explore the anxieties and fears of the characters, which are, in fact, a synecdoche of every human being. I love that you disagreed and discussed this film so respectively. Thank you so much. I cut off part of it, but I think it said greetings from Argentina. So thank you, El Vengador. So we got some love in the mailbag. Well, we also got some hate. Crisp Indri, or is this Crisp Indri? I don't know. Says sarcastically, I'm raring at the bit. This is a comment on season 3, episode 1 about Network, which was just released. We had some problems with the rendering of the video, but that was posted recently. And this viewer said, I'm raring at the bit. You're raring to go or champing, not chomping at the bit. Raring at the bit gets you a thumbs down and a do not recommend. Well, that is certainly your prerogative, Mr. or Ms. Crispin Dry. But thanks for your comment. It's a little bit harsh, but we're on the free speech platform of YouTube, so there
At
you
the
go.
rare bit. Isn't the rare bit like a type of Welsh meat?
Yeah, Welsh rare bit. Maybe that's what you had in mind when you used that phrase. Yeah,
I think so.
No, as I said, it's kind of like a Burroughs-esque cut up. You know, you take elements from one thing and slam it together with another. It's
And
a
as I said,
mashup. It's a mashup. It's a Joycean.
I'm on page 770 of Don Quixote, and Sancho Panza has a predilection for mixing up his idioms.
Yeah,
so it's a tribute to him.
So yeah, well, and it's a Joycean mashup too. You know, you're or is it Eliot-esque? These fragments you have shorn against your ruin.
I'm just trying to freshen things up.
Not shorn. Look, I just did it too. Mr. Crispin Dry is gonna, or Mrs. Crispin Dry is gonna come after me too. I said shorn, not shorn. We're not talking about cutting, but
okay, George.
Yeah, sure thing, Peter. All right, so what's next? Oh, the next text is next, and that will be more Bob Dylan. We're going to look at Bob Dylan's Desire, and we will be joined once again by Dylanologist Joe Greenwood. So look forward to that.
And only Mr. Greenwood can determine if you are a worthy Dylanite or simply a noob.
A noob. And he might also determine whether or not you're a fucking idiot. So get ready for that. All right, and then here we have a picture of the lovely Liliana de Siberia and Tom Quixote de Rosia. What's that about?
Just wanted to plug the podcast, which I worked on judiciously this summer. I think I ended up making 39 episodes, something like that, of daily sound collages reflecting my experience. They have music, they have snippets of voice messages from friends, they have sounds of rivers and mammals. Definitely worth your time if you are so inspired. And yeah, I loved making the project, and I hope it's not the last time that I work in that medium, because I found it really satisfying and rewarding.
All right. So everyone check that out. 39 days, yes? Is that what you said? 39?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I just found that quote from The Wasteland. Let me not misquote it. These fragments I have shored against my ruins.
Nice.
So
Tom will appreciate that.
Take that, Mr. Crisp and Dry. Or Ms. Crisp and Dry. All right, and as always, subscribe at Mark Will Write. That's WRITE.substack.com and tomekb.substack.com. And we're on YouTube at Mark Will Write. That's Mark Will, WRITE. Thanks again. This has been Season 3, Episode 14.
That's
Our
what we said at
text
the start.
was, yeah, hopefully that's right. Our text has been Shelagh Delaney's A Taste of Honey. And next time, we will be discussing Bob Dylan's Desire. So until then, take care.
Peace out, everybody.